This video is brought to you by Mint Mobile. So this is the iPhone 14 Pro Max versus the iPhone 15 Pro Max. I'm sure you've already seen a ton of videos comparing the two devices, so I'm going to try to make it as brief as possible, coming from my experience as far as what I think. So first, the hardware and the design. Obviously, the biggest difference is going to be the new material being used and also the new, I guess, finish to the device. So with the iPhone 14 Pro Max, you do have that, I believe it's still Corning Gorilla Glass. On the back, it is a matte finish, and then the frame is a stainless steel material. It is a glossy finish, so you do see your fingerprints. And overall, the phone itself is just like kind of flattened out. So the back is flat, the sides are flat. So on the edges themselves, they're kind of sharp. And in the hand, without a case, it does feel a bit uncomfortable, at least in my opinion. So I prefer the new feel of the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which is now using obviously titanium, and I believe it's still some form of Victus on the glass on the back. The frame is now titanium, and they softened off the edges as well as made the actual frame a matte finish as well. So overall, the iPhone 15 Pro Max definitely feels a lot more comfortable in the hand. And if you're coming from an iPhone 14 Pro Max or think even an iPhone 13 Pro Max, you're gonna feel the difference. The iPhone 15 Pro Max also is just a few grams lighter, I believe, but it also, you can feel the difference in the hand as well. I found that the iPhone 15 Pro Max is overall, it's a bit lighter and also feels a lot more comfortable. Both phones though still have pretty much the exact same camera bump, at least it looks like it. Well, there are some improvements in the camera hardware, but the camera bump itself uses a piece of glass, and then there's a silver ring that pops out, as well as the actual lenses stick out a little bit as well. Same thing on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, so it feels about roughly the same when you put them on a flat surface. They're both going to rock, but if you put a case on, then it's going to avoid, or at least help minimize that rocking on the table. And something I was curious about was wanting to know if the iPhone 14 Pro Max cases fit on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. I personally only have the D-brand grip case, and it does fit on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, but the buttons I think are not perfectly aligned. And on top of that, you do now have a action button on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, so the cutout for the case of the iPhone 14 Pro Max may be a little bit too deep for you to actually use it comfortably, but I think if you're in a pinch and don't want to buy a new case, you could probably get away with it, but I'd still be careful because it's not perfectly fitted for the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And both phones are still IP68 water and dust resistant rated, so if you splash them with water, you'll be just fine. And both phones have the power button on the right hand side. The iPhone 15 just has it a little bit lower. And then on the volume rocker side, again, both buttons are separate, volume up and volume down, and the buttons are just a little bit lower on the 15 Pro Max as well. But the biggest change is going to be obviously that the 14 Pro Max has the mute switch, and the iPhone 15 Pro Max now has the action button. So the mute switch is still very convenient, but something I've noticed myself is that I typically keep my phone muted pretty much 99% of the time. So the 14 Pro Max, I barely ever switch that mute switch. It is fun to play with sometimes though, I'll be honest, but besides that, it doesn't really get too much use. And the action button has a lot of capabilities, so you have the ability to easily change it to either just be a mute switch, and by default it is a mute switch, but you do have the ability to set it to other things such as launch the camera, launch the flashlight, launch a focus mode. There's a couple of other options by default, but the biggest thing is definitely going to be setting it to a shortcut. I'm not that well versed with shortcuts myself, but I have been playing with it a little bit, still have a lot to learn. So I was able to set up or download someone else's menu system that they created. So when you click the action button, you launch a little mini menu that allows you to then toggle a bunch of other options. So it's kind of a little bit quicker than accessing the control center because it's kind of similar to what those options are. But either way, you can probably customize the action button to do a lot more creative or just productive actions. Sometimes you may think that that action button is part of the volume rocker buttons, but I guess the best trick is to start from the top and then make your way down, or start from the bottom and make your way up. And it's also a little bit higher up. Personally, it doesn't bother me too much, but I still end up using it a good amount once you remember that it's there and that it's able to do certain actions. Both phones also do not have a physical SIM card slot, so you only are able to use eSIM. And my eSIM experience has been overall pretty good overall. I know some people have had some issues with their carriers being able to activate their eSIM and whatnot, or transferring their eSIM. Personally, it's been pretty simple for me. When I switched from the iPhone 14 Pro Max to the iPhone 15 Pro Max, I do use Mint Mobile as my personal carrier, who I'm actually partnering with for today's video. So if you ever thought to yourself, why the is my wireless bill so damn high? Well, let me tell you about Mint Mobile. You might already know Mint Mobile through Ryan Reynolds' funny ads, but let me quickly tell you a little bit about how awesome their service is and also my experience with them so far. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice speed, coverage, or data. They're built on the largest 5G network, and they actually are able to keep costs so low because they cut out the retail stores and the salespeople and sell directly to you online. So you shouldn't have to pay more than you have to access the same network. So scan the QR code or use the link down in the description to sign up for the best value in wireless. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited talk and text and have lightning fast 5G and a free mobile hotspot. Mint also offers a modern family plan, which allows you to set up an affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. I've been switched to Mint Mobile for the last 2.5 years, and I've been saving a lot of money, and I've also switched my entire family over as well, so they're using that modern family plan. And we all had a seamless experience switching over to Mint. It took like 15 minutes for each of us to switch over, and they also have the ability to use eSIM, so you can easily activate your phone and your plan straight from your home. So since these iPhones have only eSIM, it was easy to set up, and also transferring my eSIM to my iPhone 15 Pro Max from the 14 Pro Max was pretty seamless as well using the mobile app. They also have physical SIM card slots, so if your phone isn't compatible with eSIMs, they're able to ship out a physical SIM card to you for free. I personally have had a good overall experience of Mint. I've been able to do all my daily stuff using social media, watching videos, playing games, and I've noticed no difference in the speed or performance. So use my link, charmingmobile.com/tacotech. It'll be linked down in the description, or scan the QR code on the screen right now to get started. It really does help out the channel. So let me know if you've made the switch already to Mint down in the comments. Both phones also have really good haptics. I'm not sure if they changed the haptic engine or at all, going from the 14 to the 15, but it feels the same. They both feel really good. They both feel really tight. Don't feel too aggressive or too subtle. It's just right in the middle, which feels really nice when you're using the keyboard. And both phones have really good speakers. I'm not sure if they changed them much. I personally can't really tell a big difference. If there is any changes, not much of an audiophile, but to me, listening to music, watching videos, it sounds overall really good. Not only did it get pretty loud, but they just sound full and well-rounded as well. And of course, the biggest talk of the town is going to be that there's now USB-C on the iPhone 15 Pro Max versus Lightning on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So there are a bunch of benefits out there, but the biggest benefit for me has just been the fact that it's just one cable that I have to worry about. USB-C for everything that I use. Don't have to worry about buying accessories or buying extra cables just to be able to charge the iPhone. That was one of the annoying things. I should have waited till this year to buy my first iPhone. This was my first iPhone I ever, well, the second iPhone I ever bought, but brand new was the first iPhone I ever bought. So having to make sure I carried a Lightning cable with me was kind of annoying, but at least with the iPhone 15 Pro Max now, it's just USB-C. So that's the biggest benefit for me. I would have liked to seen an improvement in the charging, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but there wasn't, just a spoiler alert. And of course, there's the data transfer speeds that have also been improved. So that, I guess, will be convenient when you're transferring data, especially when I'm transferring photos and videos that I took to show you guys for the camera section of these videos. To be able to transfer it to my laptop, my MacBook, whatever, will make it a little bit faster. There's also the ability to plug in like an external hard drive and be able to record straight on it, which is awesome. But personally, I'm not going to take advantage of that, but it's definitely something that's really neat that you can do on the USB-C of the iPhone. And they also added the ability to use reverse wire charging, so you can use that for other phones, or more importantly, in my opinion, your smaller accessories such as your AirPods or just earbuds in general. Now, as far as the displays, both of them are very similar. They're the LTPR Super Retina XDR OLED, ProMotion 120Hz, 1440p quality, 2000 nits of peak brightness. So they're both going to be overall really good quality displays. Both phones are also a large 6.7-inch display. The only difference is going to be that the bezels are just a little bit slimmer on the iPhone 15 Pro Max compared to the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So I think the screen to body ratio is slightly better and higher on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. But otherwise, is it a massive difference, a massive jump? No. It's going to be a very similar overall experience, especially if you use the case. The iPhone 15 Pro Max and the iPhone 14 Pro Max are both going to feel pretty box-to-box, edge-to-edge screen-to-body ratios. But overall, that doesn't take away from the fact that both displays are overall pretty good. They're great for watching content if you're watching a lot of YouTube videos. Great HDR, Ultra HDR. It looks really bright and really good in the colors as well. Also, both are really smooth for your scrolling around, swiping around using short form content, or swiping up and down through social media. Whatever you're doing, both phones feel overall really smooth. And both displays have like a rounded corner. It's not like a boxy, box-to-box type of display. So the only thing there is some apps may not have their safe area optimized for it. And also some YouTube videos, when you zoom in, you do lose a little bit of content in those corners. And of course, the dynamic island, the pill cutout does cut away on some of your content, especially once you pinch the zoom. But there are some aspect ratio videos where the dynamic island just barely pokes itself in there, so it does cover up a little bit of the content. It's not a massive deal. You definitely get used to it over time, but something you definitely should know about in case you really want to optimize your screen to body ratio or just utilize your screen fully for all the content that you want to watch. And both displays are also flat, so it's super easy to install a tempered glass screen protector. You can get a cheap one for Amazon or wherever you get your cheap tempered glass screen protectors. It's very easy to install them as well because they're flat, no need to worry about curved edges at all. And both displays also have an always-on display available. As far as biometrics, both of them only have Face ID, and they both work pretty much exactly the same. I don't think there's been any improvements or any changes to the sensors or system and how it works. Both work really well for the most part. There's some times or some situations where it may not recognize you. Like I personally have sometimes issues in the morning when I wake up. Either it's because it's too dark or my face isn't being recognized because I don't have my glasses on. Either way, it works 95% of the time, especially in most OLED situations, far situations, different angles. For the most part, Face ID works well on both. And you're also able to keep your notifications locked on both devices until it recognizes your face. Once it recognizes your face, it'll show the details of that notifications. Now, as far as performance, the iPhone 14 Pro Max does have the A16 Bionic chip, which I think is built on a 4nm process with just roughly 6 GB of RAM. And then the iPhone 15 Pro Max has the new A17 Pro Bionic chip, which I think is built on a 3nm process and has 8 GB of RAM. What does that all mean? Basically, a great performance on both of them. You might see a difference in the spec numbers and spec sheets and benchmarks or whatever, but personally, I think both devices are top-notch performers. I think the iPhone 14 Pro Max probably still outperforms a lot of devices that are coming out this year and probably even into next year, so you're going to have a good experience when it comes to performance on both of them. The biggest concern over the past couple of weeks or even months, you could say, is that the iPhone 15 Pro Max was overheating. I personally have not had that issue because I got the iPhone 15 Pro Max after the update was already released, so the iOS 17.0.3, that supposedly helped the overheating issues. So personally, I haven't had any issues with overheating on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Both phones do get relatively warm eventually if you're using the phones to their maximum capacity. So if you're running a bunch of benchmarks or if you're playing a lot of games or maybe recording a lot of video, especially in 4K and maybe even using ProRes or whatever it is, you're gonna end up getting the phones to get pretty warm. Other than that, if you're a pretty average person, like I would say I'm a pretty average user, social media, watching YouTubes, playing the occasional game here and there, I have little to no issues with both devices. As far as software, both of them are running iOS 17.0.3, so for the most part, it's the exact same experience in my opinion. The only difference will be action button software and some of the new camera settings because of the new camera hardware. But other than that, it's pretty much the same overall experience. On a lock screen, you have the ability to add widgets. You also can customize your clock style and clock color. You can add a depth effect to the wallpaper if your wallpaper allows it, or it can sense that there's an object that can be added with a depth effect to it. And you also have the ability to switch between different lock screens easily, just holding down and go into the lock screen selector, I guess is what it's called, and select a specific lock screen, and then also set a specific focus mode to that lock screen. And I'll complain about this again, but the notification system with the iPhones, with iOS, it's not my personal favorite. I just don't like that sometimes notifications get just thrown into the notification center after some time, or if you receive a ton of notifications, they just get thrown in there and you may just miss it. I just find it annoying because there's been a couple of times where I've missed messages or just missed notifications, important ones overall in general, because they got thrown down to the notification center. And I didn't realize there was notifications down there that I hadn't seen yet, so I just ignored it when it was completely blank. So I didn't scroll all the way up to see my whole notification center. So I wish there was some kind of notification or icon or number that would say you have X amount down here that you haven't viewed or interacted with. I also find that sometimes it feels a little messy because it's supposed to automatically group apps and notifications together, so if they're from the same app or the same thread, it'll group them together, but I find that sometimes it's a little all over the place. It doesn't do the best job out there in the world, so it can feel a little overwhelming sometimes when I'm going through those notifications. At least with notifications, you also have the ability to use the scheduled summary. So basically, if you have apps that you don't want to receive notifications right away, immediately as soon as they are supposed to arrive, you can put them into this summary that basically will send you a summary of all these notifications that you choose from at a certain time period during the day, so that you're not getting spam notifications all day. I personally find it useful for apps that I don't care if I receive notifications right away for it. So a lot of games, some social media apps, or some other apps that I only use when I need them. So that's there and convenient when you need it. And then you have your home screen, which is one of my least favorite customizable sections, or least customizable section available on all of iOS. So you don't have the ability to do much here. You can obviously move your apps where you kind of want them. They do have to be forced to the upper leftmost spot on the grid, and it only allows you to use a 4x6 grid. You can't go any bigger or smaller if you want it smaller, but either way, I do wish you could use a bigger grid, and I do wish you wouldn't have to force those apps or widgets to the upper leftmost corner, because you have to use other third-party apps that allow you to use like a quote-unquote clear or invisible widget that allows you to insert your wallpaper into that app, and then it places like a cutout of your wallpaper on that specific section of the grid. And like I said, you do have widgets available. You can stack the widgets as well, so if you want to put them all in one spot, you can do so easily. And you also now have the ability to interact with widgets. And then you also have the app library, which allows you to pretty much just have all your apps in one spot, in one place. But the only thing I don't like is that you can't customize the app library. You can't move one app from one folder to a different folder. So if you feel like one app belongs to a different folder, you can't move it. You have to deal with it. I don't know if it's the developer who decides what kind of app it is or what kind of folder it belongs to, or if iOS itself automatically does it. But either way, it's kind of annoying because there's some apps that I feel like should belong in a different folder. So I do end up using the list view option all the time on the app library. And the control center is there. I personally really like the aesthetic look of it, but the functionality wise, it's pretty okay. You just toggle stuff on and off, and you can hold down on some quick setting options to be able to open up another mini menu that gives you a couple more options for that particular quick setting option. I wish all of the quick settings or toggles and options would have the ability to be held down to go into a more bigger mini menu, but not all of them have it, so it can be a little bit confusing sometimes when you try to hold down on something and it doesn't do anything. But otherwise, it's overall pretty useful. I do wish though also that it was a little bit lower, because it does tend to, similar to the home screen, force the quick setting options to higher up on the screen. And of course, you have the typical ecosystem stuff. You have your iMessage, your FaceTime, your Find My, and you also have the ability now to connect two iPhones together. So if you put them side to side here, it'll do some kind of transfer where it transfers your contact card to the other iPhone and gives it your contact info. So it's easy and simple to be able to connect with someone. I guess it's the new business card type of style, but it's pretty cool. I don't really use it, but it's there. You also have Apple CarPlay, AirDrop, and AirPlay to be able to connect your video stream wirelessly to a TV easily. I also like that they added the option to go directly to voicemail when someone's calling you. So if you can't pick up the phone, but you want to see what they're going to say, if it might be something important, you can click the voicemail option and you can see a live translation of their speech to text, and you can see what they're saying. And of course, you have the dynamic island and all its software features. I personally don't really go out of my way to try and find unique features and settings and apps for it. It's kind of just there for me. So I use it for music. So if you listen to music, it'll show you a quick option to quickly switch between songs, or pause and play, or even just scroll through the track itself. It'll also show up if you're using a timer, or if you're on a phone call, it'll show you waveforms or like a bar that goes up and down depending on who's talking. I also like the feature that allows you to double tap or triple tap the back of the phone to toggle and trigger a certain setting or option. For me personally, I have it so that double tapping brings down the control center, or triple tapping brings down the notification center. The reason I have that is because sometimes it's a bit tough to reach the very top of the screen. I also have some small minor complaints with iOS. It's just mostly because I'm coming from Android. So for one, multitasking. I wish there was some multitasking features available. So either being able to split the screen with two different apps. You do have the ability to use picture-in-picture, which is the smallest form of multitasking you could potentially do, in my opinion. So watch a video while also browsing another app in full screen. The only thing I don't like with picture-in-picture on the iOS is just that you have to have that window for picture-in-picture in one of the top left corners, or top left or top right, or bottom left or bottom right. You can't have it in the middle. And of course, you do have the ability to resize it if you wanted to, but I don't like that limitation that you can't put it in the middle. I also like that the back swipe gesture isn't really universal, so you have to sometimes click an X button or a back button, depending on the app that you're in, to be able to go back a page on whatever page you were on. It'd be just so simple if you could just swipe from the left and always go back on whatever you're doing, whatever application it is. I wish it was universal. And lastly, I don't like that some default apps, the settings for that app, you have to go to the actual settings app to be able to change those settings of that other default app. So such as the camera or the control center, you have to go into the settings app to change that up. I wish there was some kind of quick toggle within the control center or within the camera app that takes you directly to that page in the settings, so you can easily change those settings up. It would just make it so much faster and so much easier. So overall, I think iOS is just not my favorite cup of tea. They're slowly making it a little bit better, but it's still not my personal favorite. It's definitely on the simpler side and on the more limited side, which I totally get, but at the same time, I'm just not a huge fan of it. but I am a fan of how long they support the phones. Usually you get anywhere from 5 to 6, maybe even a little bit more of software updates throughout the lifetime of the phone. So you'll be able to keep these phones for a long time. And typically all iPhones tend to get the exact same update at the exact same time. I think there might be some carrier limitations or holdbacks, but besides that, both of them should be able to last you with software updates for quite a while. Now, as far as the cameras, as you may or may not know, I'm not a heavy camera user. I like to point and shoot and rely on what the camera system can do on its own to produce what it can do. I'm not a big tinker when it comes to the cameras. I do want to learn more about it, but as of now, I'm just more of a point and shoot kind of guy, especially with my phone cameras. But one of the biggest improvements they made is they updated the telephoto lens on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. So now it's a tetra prism telephoto versus just a regular telephoto on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So you now can go to an optical of 5x versus an optical of 3x on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So I personally am pretty happy with that because I prefer to have a further zoom capability when it comes to optical zoom as well as digital zoom. I like that from the S23 Ultra, from even the Pixel series, or even the Z Fold series. They all have the ability to zoom in pretty far and much farther than the iPhone was able to before. So what I'm going to do is just throw some samples up for you guys and you can decide on your own whether you like them or not. So let me know in the comments what you think of the cameras. iPhone 15 Pro Max versus 14 Pro Max on just regular default settings. Pretty nice, and they both look the same. iPhone 15 Pro Max versus iPhone 14 Pro Max and some pretty low light. It's as dark as it ever get. A little bit of light. iPhone 15 Pro Max versus iPhone 14 Pro Max in regular default settings. I'm just looking at him, it's kind of funny. Let's do a little walking. This is 3x, by the way, on both of them. This is 5x on both of them. Now we have max zoom 15x on 15 Pro versus max zoom 9x on 14 Pro Max. Action mode on both ultra wide. Now switching to action mode on the wide. the same to me. I don't see much of a difference. Now, as far as battery life, the iPhone 15 Pro Max does have a 4,441 milliamp hour battery versus the iPhone 14 Pro Max that has a 4,323 milliamp hour battery. I think I read those right from the spec sheets. But either way, slightly small improvement as far as the size on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. But overall, I found both of them to give me good overall battery life. I know a lot of people over the past year or so with the iPhone 14 Pro Max have complained that the battery life hasn't been as good as the previous version, and also their battery health has degraded pretty fast compared to previous iPhones. I personally haven't had that experience, but then again, I don't use the iPhone 14 Pro Max, or used it, I should say, as my day-to-day every single day. I was switching to other devices or just was choosing not to use the iPhone 14 Pro Max as my day-to-day option. So my battery health has been just fine. It's 100%. So with my battery life experience, it's been really good overall. And the iPhone 15 Pro Max, I've only been using it for about a week now as of the recording of this video. So for me, it's hard to say whether it's good or not, but as of now, it's pretty good overall, and they're pretty much the exact same. I'm finding that both of them can last me at least, at the minimum, 24 hours. And then at most, probably 28 to 30 hours or so. So there wasn't really a difference. I didn't do like an actual battery life comparison, but just in my day-to-day experience using them as an average person, they were both lasting me a good amount of time. And I was getting anywhere from 2 to 3 at the minimum of screen on time, just because my day was not really using my phone that much, which means that usually that meant that my phone was lasting a lot longer overall. But if on my heavier days, I got anywhere from like 5 to 7 hours of screen on time. And even then, still lasting me around 24 hours or so. As far as charging speeds, I was really hoping the iPhone 15 Pro Max would improve a little bit with the introduction of USB-C, but unfortunately not the case as of this moment, or as of this version of iPhone. But for the most part, they're pretty much exactly the same. They take just as long. So it's pretty fast, going from 0 to about 50 or 60%, and it starts to slow down after a little bit. So, which I think is perfectly fine to help with that battery degradation. Not that I think it did much for the iPhone 14, but either way, that should help with that. And also, if you happen to need to charge in the afternoon, right before you go out or something, plug it in for 15-20 minutes and you'll get in more than enough battery life to be able to last you for the rest of the night into the morning. So both of them also have the same MagSafe charging speeds. I think it's 15 watts, which I don't really use MagSafe. You also have regular wireless charging, which I think caps at 7.5. And like I said earlier, the iPhone 15 Pro Max does have reverse wired charging at, I think, 4.5 watts. So this will be good for charging, I would say, like AirPods or something like that, but not a full phone. But still pretty cool that you can do that now. So then today, jumping from the iPhone 14 Pro Max to the iPhone 15 Pro Max, not really worth it in my opinion, unless you're getting a good trade-in offer, or you're able to sell your phone for a good price and you're only paying an extra maybe $100 or $200 to upgrade. Then yeah, I think it's definitely worth it then. But otherwise, I think you're better off waiting a year. I think it's pretty clear and obvious with a lot of phones nowadays. You're better off holding on to your phone for at least 2 years before you make a jump to a different device or the next generation. If you're coming from a much older device and want to decide between these two, I think it depends on your accessories and what kind of stuff you're using nowadays to decide between those two. Because if you're using a lot of devices that already use USB-C, I think it's going to be a nice convenience going to the iPhone 15 Pro Max that uses USB-C. You get all the new features and specs and stuff with the iPhone 15 Pro Max. But if you're coming from a lot of Lightning stuff and you don't want to deal with the hassle of switching to USB-C and you're so used to Lightning, then jumping from an older iPhone to an iPhone 14 Pro Max, I think it's going to be a decent upgrade. You're still getting a very good device, and you're already built into the Lightning ecosystem, so that won't make a difference to you. So you can use this device for at least 2-3 years. Once your Lightning accessories are worn out and done for, then you can trade your iPhone 14 Pro Max to the latest iPhone to get that USB-C, or maybe you're portless at that point. But either way, that's just my thoughts. I think both devices are still very good today. Whichever one you get, you're obviously going to be super satisfied. If you want the latest, obviously you have no other choice but to get the iPhone 15 series. But if you just want to save a couple bucks, a couple $100, I would probably consider getting an iPhone 14 Pro Max. But again, depends on what you're coming from. So with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully this was helpful. And peace.